One. Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, managing editor of Canada's Entrepreneur. Joining me today is Paul Van Ginkel on Calgary's podcast. Paul is based in Calgary and is an artist. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Thanks, Mario. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, well, let's talk just a little bit about your career. Now, how did you get into all this? Uh, uh, did you were you a drawer or a sketcher as a little boy?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of these things that we all experience when we're in high school. It's like, what are we going to do with the rest of our life?
Yeah.
So that, we're at such a young age, we have to make such huge decisions. But back in high school, I went through the same thing and thought, well, I really like this art thing. I'm a pretty good artist, relatively speaking. Back in high school, loved my class and so on. So it was only in grade 12 where I found out about the Alberta College of Art. And grade 12 for me was in 1978. And so I hadn't really known about that college. So I applied, and the rest, as they say, is history.
You,
But like a lot of kids, Mario. I mean, I did a lot of sketches, and I really enjoyed it. I still have a lot of those sketches with me today, which have become more valuable over time.
yeah.
So yeah, and when I went to school, I mean, I was an average art student, but I was really into it. I loved it, and I really had a lot of enjoyment, and I saw lots of promise and future.
Can you talk just going back, when you were young, like what did you like to draw? Like what was your favorite topics, I guess?
Um, you know, George Charles Schultz's Peanuts, that Peanuts, with Snoopy and Charlie Brown and so on. That was a big hit for me. That combined with superhero comics, Frank Frazetta, who was a superhero artist back in the day. He was a big inspiration for me. So like a lot of artists back then and still, I copied all those images and learned from that. Things I created were like, actually war scenes and so on. You had tanks and army and helicopters, so that interested me as well. But it was mainly that, and then that was the first subjects that I explored. And then I got into Western. I got into, cowboys and Indians, even as a young boy, as a young 10-year-old boy. So those subjects really inspired me. And again, I love the fact that I have a stack of those drawings. Interesting too, Mario, because one thing I tell parents to this day is, if your child does a lot of drawings and paintings and so on, they will sign the drawings usually because that's part of the creation of the piece, but they won't date them. So on the back of those drawings, put a date on them because, today with the drawings that I have as a kid, I'm kind of wondering if I was 8 years old or if I was 11 years
Uh,
old. So as a professional, that timeline means more to me.
yeah. Let's go back in time. Now, full transparency here. Paul and I used to work together at the Calgary Herald. Tell us a little bit about what you did at the Herald, Paul, and then what sparked, I guess, your leaving there and venturing off into doing this.
Yes, absolutely. Getting back to art college, the Alberta College of Art, um, first year, every student has to take like general studies to find out what major area they want to go into. That it may have changed. That format may have changed slightly. Now it's a university, the Alberta University of the Arts. But back when I was there, that's what we did. And so then most students back when I went to school there wanted to get into visual communications, which is like commercial art, primarily because you can get a job afterwards.
Yeah.
But my grades were not high enough. And so I didn't get in. So I considered dropping out. And I, did a lot of soul searching, spoke to a lot of family, friends, especially the counselors at ACAD. And one counselor in particular encouraged me to stay in school. Uh, in my second year, take painting, printmaking, and so on, and then try to get into my major area, visual communications, as a direct entry in my third year. So I was successful at doing that. And so then I completed 4 years and I was going into my fifth year. And I was always ambitious back then and even still. And I saw an ad in the Calgary Herald looking for an editorial illustrator. And so I applied and I was offered that job. So I dropped out of art school in my fifth year in 1983 to take that job at the Calgary Herald. And it wasn't just a job, it was a great job. And frankly, it was, a relatively good paying job. But the main thing is I would be illustrating. So I would be painting.
Yeah.
And so I took that job and loved it. So I was there. I didn't think that was going to be like a really long time because my end goal ambition was to be a fine art painter. So worked for the Herald from September 1983 and resigned effective January 1st, 1990 to be a full-time fine art painter. But I loved working at the Herald. I mean, as you know directly, Muriel, I mean, just the energy, the collaboration, the thrill of being published. In those 6+ years that I was at the Herald, there were over 1,000 of my pieces published.
Wow.
And I like every morning, every next morning when they were posted, I clipped them out. I had a stack of papers. I've since threw them out because they yellowed and they got a
Yeah.
little old. But it was always a thrill and it was an honor. And as you recall, back in those days, the Calgary Olympics was on as well in
Yeah.
1988.
Yeah.
And so that was another, challenge and thrill to be part of that. And even though I was an illustrator, that was my specialty, informational graphics and charts and so on was a big part of it as well. So part of the motivation, frankly, to resign, not just to pursue my dream of being a painter, was because there was fewer and fewer illustration assignments and more computer graphics and so on.
Ah,
And
interesting.
that, I'd rather have a paintbrush in my hand than a mouse. So that wasn't so much, discouraging because I knew that the writing was on the wall. But it was time to leave when I did, and I never looked back.
Now, when you left, did you not go to school in the States?
Yes, while I was actually at the Herald, I did earn a Master of Fine Arts degree from Syracuse University through an independent degree program.
Okay.
And so what that entailed is that there were three summers that I went to Syracuse University for 3 weeks and worked there. But there were assignments that one could do at home, of which I did. There were also trips that we took to New York, like as a class, to New York, Boston, Dallas, places like that to continue our studies. So it's an official Master of Fine Arts, but it was done through an independent study degree program. And credit to the Herald. Of course, I had to pitch that to the Herald, and they agreed for me to pursue that. So I'm
Oh,
very grateful to them.
okay. So today, you're obviously a very well-known, very successful artist. Go back in time, back to when you first started. So that's 30 plus years ago now. Uh, was it scary to embark on a career full time as an artist?
Oh, absolutely. Because back when I was working for the Herald, again, it was a good job. It was a good paying
Yeah.
job, and my I was married at the time to my first wife, and she was in law school, and she thought I was crazy and it was reckless, to resign because we needed the money and so on. But I convinced Susan that this is my passion. She knew I was hardworking and ambitious. I had a couple of leads, and I did commercial freelance assignments while I worked for the Herald as well. So I had a bit of a track record in a sense. So I had some leads, but the biggest thing is I just had the fire in my belly, the burning desire that I just had to do this, and I was determined, not to fail. So sure, it was scary, but it still is scary. It's good. It's good to have that motivation to go to work every day and do the best you can be. So I'm happy to report my first year as a freelancer. I made more than I made as my last year working for the Calgary Herald. So I was off to a good start, and it was one of those things, Mario, that I just knew I had to do. When is the best timing? Who knows when the best timing is? The best timing is when you feel it's right, and you're not reckless, but you go after it. That's important.
Now let's talk a little bit about the subject material. First of all, I think you know you do a lot of different things now, but I think uh, I guess your claim to fame, for lack of better wording, is the whole cowboys and Western and indigenous side of things.
Yeah.
What was it and still is to this day about that topic that you just love to paint?
Yeah, I could certainly talk on three more podcasts about that. But great question, Mara, because it's obviously instrumental in my career. It goes very quickly. It goes way back to when I was born in Winnipeg, and our family took a family vacation in 1970 to the Great Calgary Stampede. Um, I was a young impressionable boy, young man, and we saw the Calgary Stampede. So that moment, I was like hooked on cowboys and Indians. And as I noted, I was drawing them anyways prior to our Calgary Stampede trip. So I was hooked on cowboys and Indians, and that's how we referred to it back then.
Yeah.
And so fast forward, when it was time to choose a subject as a professional, I had done Western paintings and stuff leading up to this moment, but it was like a no-brainer. So I love the subject. Living in Calgary in the Great Calgary Stampede, there's lots of exposure and emphasis on Western life and cowboys and Indians. Frankly, now it's First Nations, of course, and that's the proper way of referring to them. And Indigenous, uh, our Indigenous community, but it was that, and so there was, in addition to that being my passion, there's a great market currently for that type of imagery. But it's their whole lifestyle and history, Mariel. I mean, with cowboys, I just love, from the aesthetic, I just love the rugged nature of them. Like real men and real women and horses and incorporating, our land and animals into their whole lifestyle. The way they look again. Um, I kind of wanted some of that. I wanted that to rub off on me too. Similarly to the our First Nations, their beautiful regalia. The history of the First Nations in the world and our country in particular. All those elements and just the way they are and their quiet confidence and their humility and their sense of community, like all those wonderful areas is something that I'm really drawn to. And as a direct result, I've got to know over the years, a lot of cowboys and First Nations in those communities, and I've been privileged to be a part of that community in a real personal way for a long time.
Yeah. Now you mentioned the Stampede. Every year, Stampede does its posters.
Yeah.
How many of those have you done?
Just one, Mario, because every artist just does one.
Oh, it's just one. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, so and that's up to the current Stampede president. So there's a new Stampede president every 2 years, and they can essentially do whatever they want. Back when I did the poster in 2007, George Berkman was the president. One of the things he wanted to do in his 2 year tenure is dramatically change the look of the Stampede poster. So the Stampede poster has been around since the start of the Stampede in 1912. Up to this point, it was always up to 2006. It was always a commercial illustration, done by an advertising agency, with a central image, border treatment of what else you can see and do at Stampede, which has been a great model. But George wanted to change all that. He just wanted a simple fine art painting. So of course I knew George at the time. I remember the day, he called me into his office. We chatted about it, and I pitched a couple of ideas, including just a simple, iconic, timeless scene of a cowboy with his horse drinking a cup of coffee. Could have happened 100 years ago, will probably happen again 100 years from now.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
he loved the idea. And so that became the 2007 Stampede poster.
yeah.
It was a painting that I did called Loyal Friends. So
Perfect.
that was the only one I did. So, going forward, the subsequent, I think, three Stampede presidents kept that same model of doing a fine art painting. And that painting also was auctioned off at the annual Calgary Stampede auction as well. That was something that George started. But for the last, I believe, 6 years, it's now been a student competition, which has been really great. I've been an adjudicator as well. So it's a great opportunity for a student to get that assignment because you get global exposure. The Stampede poster is the single biggest advertising feature
Oh, yeah.
for the Stampede. 25,000 posters distributed worldwide. You can walk into a cafe in Athens, Greece, and you might see a Stampede poster. So it's a real thrill for the students to have that assignment now.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the other type of stuff you do beyond the Western stuff. What is it that you, first of all, what is it that you like to paint beyond that? And where do you see the future? Do you see expanding into other areas?
Yeah, definitely. We all want to be inspired going to work, and if one can control their destiny or their work or the type of stuff they do, and artists certainly can, and that's what I try to do, Mario. I mean, I first and foremost, I paint for myself. I want to learn. I want to grow. That's never stopped. Every painting I start, I'm nervous and I have insecurities, because my bar is now pretty high that I've set. But once I get painting, then the rhythm starts and so on. But in the spirit of wanting to grow, even though, again, as you pointed out, if I'm known for anything, it's my Western work, and I'm grateful for that. Yes, I do a lot of other things. I do a lot of dance themes, from ballet to belly dance to burlesque, but especially flamenco.
Yeah.
And I do, the First Nation stuff, even though that falls under the umbrella of Western, perhaps, First Nations. Travel, I travel extensively on my own and with my family. And always as a result of travels, especially Italy, especially Venice, I do a series of paintings. And one of the many interesting things about that too, Mario, in addition to, learning more things about me as an artist, it opens up new markets for me. Even though I have some collectors who like to collect from all my series, I'm grateful for that, obviously. Um, People buy my dance paintings, will never buy my Western paintings. So it opens up that as well. Kind of on that note as well. Sure, I think I'm a decent painter, and I'm proud of that. But I'm most proud of the fact that I've been doing this for 42 years now, full time, because I focus on the business side. And that's a real art form in itself, and it's a challenge, and it's fluid. It's always changing. Every single day almost, and you got to keep current. You got to keep trying things. So that's a big. It's all very well and nice to create a product, but how do you package it, market, and sell it?
It's fun. I'm glad you brought that up because I do recall a conversation we had many, many years ago. And you did mention that to me that you basically have two jobs, right? On the
Yeah.
one hand, you're the artist, and the other hand, you're the businessman,
Yeah.
right? So how do you like in a day, like how do you kind of put those two together? Like,
Yeah, it's a wonderful, for me, it's a wonderful challenge. And first and foremost, with that and life in general, one needs to be optimistic and positive because and we have the power to choose our attitude and how we approach things. And I'm always
yeah,
positive. I'm not naive and I'm realistic. I'm pragmatic, but I'm always positive because being self-employed, you know, it's a great unknown and it could be scary. Nothing can happen, but on the other hand, everything can happen. So I hedge on that all the time and just be patient and so on. So when I go into work, even though I'm self-employed, I'm extremely disciplined. I keep a tight ship. I'm my own boss, and I don't let myself off the hook. I take as much vacation as the next guy. I work as hard as the next guy that works hard. So when I go in the morning, I'm wearing one hat. I'm accessing, my left brain, the business side and so on, doing all the business stuff in the morning with the intent to clear my mind, put on the other hat, the right brain, and get to the easel. So that's always my focus. I try to paint every day. I mean, I would if I didn't have other business things to do, but I address the business things because they're important and they clear my head so I can just paint. So I have the same system all the time. Sometimes I get to the easel at 10 o'clock in the morning, sometimes at 1 o'clock, but I always try to paint every day. And because I've been doing it for such a long time, I've also created, close to 2,200 paintings. It doesn't, my style is very loose and quick and painterly, even though it's representational with a lot of detail. I can get a lot done in 4 hours of painting. Absolutely. And I can get a lot done. And so with that too, because it's so, I paint standing up because generally I paint large paintings. It's kind of, physically draining in a sense. So painting 4 hours a day, that's enough. Some of my colleagues paint 10, 12 hours a day. I don't know how they can do it, but I've been doing this for such a long time. I shut it off at 5 o'clock and I'm done.
Interesting. Yeah. So what was the most expensive one you've sold? How much?
uh, $65,000
And what
for a
was that
single
one?
painting. It was a commission from Chief Crowfoot from the Siksika Nation. Yeah, with that, Mario, I mean, since you asked, I've befriended the chief, many years ago, and he's an impressive man who gets things done. He finally signed, Siksika finally, through his guidance and leadership, the Siksika Nation signed the 1915 land reclamation agreement with the federal government a few years ago for $1.3 billion. And to acknowledge that significant milestone, he commissioned 4 large paintings from me, 2 for the nation and 2 for himself personally. So the one that I just referenced was a 10-foot by 6-foot painting of, um, you know, 18 different individuals who are in the teepee at Blackfoot Crossing when they signed the agreement with Trudeau and the chief and so on. So it was like a portrait of these 18 people
Cool.
during that significant occasion. So that was the one.
And what
But,
was
but
that
the
called?
commission itself encompassed 4 paintings.
And what was that called, that one painting?
Uh, I'm pausing because when I do assignments like that for Chief Crowfoot, of which I've done many, I get him to title them, and he
Ah,
titles them in Blackfoot.
okay.
Yeah, and I do a translation in English, but respectfully, I don't know the title off the top of my head, but
Okay.
I gave him the opportunity to title it.
Okay.
Yeah,
No, wonderful.
yeah,
And what was the one that took you the longest amount of time to do, and how long would that?
yeah. Another great question, of course. As a related sidebar, I only work on one painting at one time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, only because every painting has its own style and language and feel and so on. So I don't jump around. The set painting on my easel gets my full attention from start to finish. And whenever I start painting in the day, I kind of look at the time. When I stop, I record how much time I spend on that given day, and I kind of write it on the side of the canvas. And so when the painting is done, I add it all up and I have exactly how many hours I spent on that painting, and I
Cool.
put that into my ledgers. And I've been doing that since I started, over 40 years ago. So I know exactly how much time every painting takes, and over time that has always served me well. So all that said, the painting I just addressed for Chief Crowfoot, that took the most time, but that has changed. There's a new painting I did last year, another commission that surpassed that in time. I did a commission for Smith Built Hats of the chuck wagon driver Troy Dorchester, and it was 10 feet by 5 feet. A ton of detail. It was Troy coming around the bend, racing at the Calgary Stampede, with the grandstand in the background. Okay, and in that grandstand, Mario, of course, they were, as you know full well, they're usually sold out. So I had to paint. I painted 706 people in that grandstand, and I know that for certain because I counted all the heads. So that combined with the detail of Troy and so on,
Yeah.
that took the most time, and that took. I should know this. Took about 106 hours, over the course of 3 weeks or so
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
paint that one.
Wow.
As a related kind of fun sidebar, if you will, I've done a lot of large herd paintings, horse herd paintings,
Yeah.
and when I do that, I count the horses because I find that's interesting. I did one last year, and I titled it 40 Hats and 232 Horses because there were 232 horses in that painting and 40 cowboys with hats. So with the painting I just referenced about Troy Dorchester, I thought, well, this time I'm going to count all the faces in the crowd, and there were
Wow.
706 faces. So that was fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm just curious when you are painting, um, like can you describe that moment? Like, what's it like for you? Like, could things crash around you and you wouldn't notice anything going on because you're so focused? Like, maybe describe that part of it.
Yeah, you know, if I could be so bold, I suspect most, if not all, artists experience this, and artists in all disciplines, from painters to writers to musicians to performers. In a sense, it's hard to describe, but as you can tell, I like talking, so I could probably articulate. Um, it's a real out of body experience, and in my particular case, I always listen to music when I paint,
Oh,
always. And as I referenced earlier, once all my admin stuff and business stuff is done, I put in my AirPods and I choose the music to directly influence the painting I'm working on. If it's going to be like really like a very aggressive, abstract kind of stallion painting or something, I might put on rap music like Eminem or something. If I'm doing a very detailed portrait, I might put on flute music from Carlos Nakai or something. So I'm really quite, music. I'll go on a limb and say, music is even more important to me than visual art. So I use it in the context of my work, but also just in life in general, of course. I
yeah.
love music, as I know you do. So so I put the music in, I get locked in, I set up, it takes me about 20 minutes to set up all my paints and my palette and get all ready. I kind of set myself up for success, if you will. I got a great studio, great light, all that stuff is in play, and then just get into it. And honestly, it's the excitement, the exhilaration. I'm not an athlete and I don't do those other things, but I can only imagine it's like that. It's like, a swimmer or a sprinter at the starting blocks. And once the gun goes off, the adrenaline is just like letting you loose, like it's a chuck wagon race. And that's how I feel about painting because I love it so much. Even to this day, Mario, and I just turned 65. I mean, retirement is nowhere near in my future because I love it so much.
I hear
Even,
you.
to this day, I drive to the studio and I have butterflies in my stomach, just anticipating painting. You know, it just, you just get lost in it. I hope all of us have those opportunities or outlets or moments when you get lost in something. I mean, whether it's reading or playing a sport or doing something creative. That's how painting is for me. Just completely lost in it. And, you know, and maybe because you and I have been friends and close friends and business associates to an extent, maybe you even notice that when you send me something, I electronically, I reply right away. That's because I don't want to think about anything else. I don't want to think about having to text you down the road, Mario. I do it right away. Like if I'm painting, and then just to keep my head clear and keep the focus on the painting I'm working on.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
thanks so much, Paul, for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you.
Yeah, I really appreciate this opportunity, Mario, and I'll see you in person probably soon. Maybe at Spruce Meadows Masters.
Oh, before we leave, how
Yeah.
can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, thank you. Of course, I'm on all social media platforms. Um, I don't answer the phone when I'm painting, but the best source for my work is my website, paulvanginkel.com. And I say that because you can get a real, if you so choose, you can get a deep dive into my history, my
Yeah.
archives, my current work. This podcast will end up being on my website as well. So paulvanginkel.com. There you can find my phone number, my email address, and everything you need.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Mario. Really appreciate it.
Okay, that was Paul Van Ginkel, an artist based in Calgary. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, managing editor of Canada's Entrepreneur. Thanks for joining us today.